This is Gemara and Sotah Daf Mem Aleph. I'm holding on Mem Aleph, Amid Aleph. We are 2 lines from the top. And the Gemara continues quoting in the Mishnah that which the Kohen Gadol is reading. What does the Kohen Gadol read? And in between those psukim he's going to skip. And again, I hope this does sound a bit familiar. As we've seen these Gemaras in Yuma, we've seen these Gemaras in Megillah, Baruch Hashem. Says the Gemara 3 lines from the top, Ramenu, I'll ask you a contradiction. Says in a Braisa, a Mishnah Megillah, Chav Dalet Amar Aleph, Medalgin Minavi, Medalgin Ba'Toiro. You're not allowed to skip in Torah. So what's going on over here? Amar Abaye, Loi Kasha, Kan Bechlei Sheifsik Targum, Turguman. The Turguman was the one that would yell out and translate the Torah that the Kohen Gadol was reading. So if you take a break long enough that the Turguman has to stop, that's a problem. But if you take a break long enough the Turguman does not have to stop, then it's not a problem skipping places. Asks the Gemara of Allah, Katani, but we learned on it, Medalgin ba'navi ve'ein medalgin ba'Torah, avad kama medalgin. And with the Gemara over there modified. Don't skip in Torah. When you skip in Navi, how much can you skip? Michlal, the obvious inference, and it's almost explicit. Michlal to Torah, klal klal. You can't do anything in Torah, no skipping at all. So what's going on with the Kohen Gadol? Elam Rabbaye loy kasha, kan binyan echad, kan b'shnei inanim. By 2 inyanim you cannot skip. By 1 inyan you could skip. Ve'hatanya. And as Rashi, being the ultimate Rebbe, always points out whenever the Vatanya is different, Rashi over here says Vatanya is binichusa. It's a raya. Says the Braisa Medalgin ba'Torah bininechad b'navi b'shnei inyanim. Ve'kan. How much? You need both things. You have to be with 1 inyan and the amount of skipping that the Turguman will not get messed up. Vein medalgin minavi lenavi, you cannot skip from one navi to the next. Minavi shall shneim asar, you could skip. Badu belvad, shlayig like misoif a sefer litchilasai, but provided you do not skip long enough from the end of the sefer until its beginning. And okay, they point out on the bottom over here that it can't actually mean skipping from the end to the beginning, because then it's going to take longer, and that's why we're darshing that what it means is you cannot go backwards. And with that we continue in the Gemara. We are 3 lines from the wide lines. Aleph says the Gemara. What does the Kohen Gadol do? He rolls up the Torah and he puts it in his chest. Says the Gemara. Why does he do this? What's going on over here? Why does the Kohen Gadol have to announce more that's written over here? I'm saying, what's going on? He's saying a Parsha Baal Peh, and he has to make a whole announcement about the Sefer Torah. Says the Gemara, very importantly, Shalotzi Lazal Sefer Torah, you never want to have a Laz. You never want people to think that the Sefer Torah is not kosher. So if the Kohen Gadol a moment ago read for the Torah, and now he's not reading for the Torah, but rather what's he doing? He's reading Baal Peh. Sounds like there's an issue with the Torah. That is the reason. Continues the Gemara, this is the portion that he read Baal Peh. Ask the Gemara, why? Why is he reading about Peh? Why don't you just wind, Mishnah Torah as they call it? Why don't you just wind the Torah and read from the appropriate place? Amar Ravuna bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Shila is such an important rule. It's not kavod atzibur to make people wait. So we don't do that. Says the Gemara, okay. Take another Sefer Torah, read it for a minute. Answers the Gemara, Ravuna bar Yehuda, excuse me, Amar. People are going to think the first one is possible. Reish Lakish Amar, different Torahs, I think on a new Torah, it's going to require a new bracha. And that is the reason why we do not. Ask the Gemara, really? If you take out a second Torah, you're worried that people are going to think it's possible? Maybe Shalosh Torahs. We actually say this is past year. Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, you bring out 3 Torahs. So why are you telling me that you're chayshish that people are going to think it's possible? We see that on Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, we do indeed take out 3 Sefer Torah. Answers the Gemara, Tlasa Gavri, B'tlasa Sifri. Leka B'kama. 3 aliyahs, 3 different Sifrei Torah, that's not a problem. But Chad Gavra B'trei Sifri. Ika B'kama. When you have one person, you have the Kohen Gadol reading from 2 different Sifrei Torah, that is going to cause people to think it's a Pagam. That's why you don't take it another Sefer Torah. You don't whine because they covered seabirds, so rather the Kohen Gadol is forced to read it Baal Peh. And the Gemara continues that the Kohen Gadol recites 8 brachos. We are 6 lines into the wide lines of Alpha and Aleph. Muvarach aleo shmeina bracha, says the Gemara Tana Rabbanan. Mevarchin ala toiro. Okay, there's mevarchin bebeis hagneses. What are the brachos? Number 1, he makes a bracha ala toiro. Just like make a bracha beis knesses, this is referring to the bracha after reading the Torah. Asher nasan lanu es Torah emes, now referring to the Bachar Banu, as all the brachas we're about to see are all after the Leini. So number 1 is Asher nasan lanu es Torah. V'al avoda v'al eidav v'amichlasavon kitikanan. Al mikdash b'fnei atzma is number 5. Al kahanim b'fnei atzma is number 6. Al yisrael b'fnei atzma is number 7. V'al yishalayim b'fnei atzma is number 8. V'ashar b'tfilah. And the bracha for the rest of the davening, Tanu Rabbanan, Hashar Tfilah Tchina Rino Bakosh Hashem Yisrael. The rest is a tefillah, it's a supplication, it's a praise and a request. For whom? For Gans Klal Yisrael, Sha'amcha Yisrael, your people, Srichel Nivashei Hashem, please. They need to be saved. V'chaisim, and he will conclude B'Shemei Tfilah. Mikan ve'ilach, from that point and onward. Kol echad ve'echad maybe Sefer Torah, each and every person would go home and bring out his personal Sefer Torah, mitoch be'isei v'kayir, and he would read from it. Why? Kol kach lama, what are we doing? We're having a Sefer Torah parade? Yes. Kedei laharois chazuto l'rabim, you want people to see your beautiful Sefer Torah? Zeh keli v'anvehu. You want everyone to see the beautiful Torah that you have. And we continue with the Mishnah, the mitzvahs of Hakel. We are in a Shnas Hakel right now. It says the Mishnah that by Hakel we have men, women, anoshim, nashim, v'taf, and what do? The king reads from the Torah. So says the Gemara. Previously in the Mishnah we learned that when the king read, it has to be B'Lashon HaKodesh. Now, says our Mishnah, let's go a little bit deeper into what is this mitzvah of Hakel. Says the Mishnah, Parshas HaMelech Keitzad, Parshas HaMelech Keitzad. Says the Mishnah, what is the parsha read by the king? Motzei Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, and Motzei Yom Tov, the first day of Sukkot B'Shmini, B'Shmini, at the beginning of the 8th. The Gemara is going to tell us what that means. B'maitzai Shvi'is, the year following Shemitah, which of course is the year that we're in right now. Oisin le'bama shalei, to make a bima of wood, be'ezra, ba'azar, and nazara. For Yoshev Elah, and the king would sit on it, Shnamar, Mikit, Shavashanim, B'moed, V'goymer. Chazan, HaKnesses, Noizal Sefer Torah, V'noizal Rosh HaKnesses, the Chazan, the attendant would give it to the Rosh Beis HaKnesses. Rosh Beis HaKnesses, Noizal the Skan, to the attendant, V'skan, Noizal the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol, Noizal the Melech, V'amelech, Oymedu Mekabel, V'koirei. The Melech would accept it, sit down, stand and read. Incorrect. And he would read sitting down. Says the Mishnah, Agrippas HaMelech Amar V'kibel V'kara Oymed. Agrippas didn't listen and he would read standing up. The Chachamim praised him. When he reached Losuchal says when he reached the pasuk, when he reached Losuchal says Ishnachri, you cannot place the king a Ishnachri till Go'enav Demais. His eyes started flowing with tears. Amrulai, Al Tityare, do not be afraid, Agrippas. Why? Achinu ata, you are a brother, you are a brother. And we go back to the reading of Hakel, B'kar Mitzchilas Ila Dvarim, Achma, Vishma Vayim Shemaya Aser Taser, Kisechel Aser, Parshas HaMelech, Brachos Ukla Lois, Achai Kaimer Kol HaParsha, Brachos, Kohen Gadol Mevarech HaSon, Melech Mevarech HaSon. The same bracha that we just finished discussing, the 8 brachas of the Kohen Gadol and Melech will make those brachas. But rather you would switch and you make the bracha of the regalim in place of the bracha of the mechilas ha'avin. So says the Gemara in the Mishnah, as we read, had a funny word in there. Randomly it said, Bishmini b'motzai shvius. So what did it mean by Bishmini? Says the Gemara, Bishmini Sagadaitach. Really, you think it's on the 8th year? Ema Bishminis. So it should say, Bishmini Sagadaitach. You think it's on the 8th day of Yontif? We just said it's not. It's Motzai Yontif Rishon. Ema Bashminis, rather it means the 8th year. Cholani Lamali. Why do they have to have all these things? The Gemara is going to explain Sri Chidikas Rachman Miketz. It would have just said at the end of the 7th year. I mean, now you knew Mehashta. I would think you would count 7 years from now, which was 40 years after leaving Mitzrayim. V'hav Gavz Lo Mitzrayim Shemitah, and it would have nothing to do with Shemitah. Because Rachmana Shemitah, because Rachmana Shemitah, have a meaning of Seif Shemitah at the end, because Rachmana B'Amayid, because B'Amayid, have a meaning of Rishat, at the beginning of the year, because Rachmana B'Chaga Sukkos, because Rachmana B'Chaga Sukkos, have a meaning of Iliyont of Achron, because Rachmana B'Boi Kol Yisrael, when all of Klal Yisrael comes, Me'eschalta D'Mayid, as we turn over to Mem Aleph Amid Beis. What does that teach us? When everyone comes to be Oila Regel, which is at the beginning of the Yontif. And that is the progression in the Mishnah, the seemingly redundant phrases telling us when exactly Hakal takes place, but the Gemara now explains why indeed it is not redundant at all, but rather all the details are extremely necessary. And we continue reading the Gemara Memal from the top line, and we had this train of it passing off the Sefer Torah until it reached the Melech. Says the Gemara, similar to what we saw before about the Kohen Gadol, now we see about the Melech. Sounds like we're giving kavod to the Talmud. It sounds like we're giving kavod to the attendant, the Rosh Knesset, etc. No, it's not that they're all getting kavod. The opposite, afoch. They're all a piece of the ultimate kavod of giving it to the king. The king would accept it standing, and then the V'Karyesh would read it sitting. He read it even standing. Says the Gemara, says the Kohen Gadol stands up, the Melech stands up to take the Torah standing from the Kohen Gadol. I asked the Gemara of Amar Mar, Ein Yeshiva Ba'azara. Gemara and Yuma that we learned, that what do you mean? You're not going to sit in the Azara, so how could the king have been sitting? Answers the Gemara, so they were in the Ezes Nashim. That's the reason why the king was indeed allowed to sit. And then we said a story in the Mishnah that Agrippas accepted the Torah standing, and he read for the Torah standing. And the Chachamim praised Agrippas. We are 10 lines down. The first word in the line is Chachamim. Says the Gemara, they praised him. Sounds like he did the right thing. Even according to the opinion that says a nasi is allowed to forgive his kavod, but a melech shemachal al kavod ain't kavod machal. Shenever soif doesn't melech a melech shtei mas alecha mitzvah. Eshetel emas alecha. Excuse me. So ask the Gemara, how could Agrippas HaMelech, how could have been moichel on his kavod and sit and stand while reading the Torah? Answers the Gemara, mitzvah shiny. A mitzvah is different. Therefore, Agrippas was indeed able to be moichel on his kavod for the sake of the mitzvah. And we continue, we're about 15 lines down. First one line is Leloi Kshegia Leloi Sucha Lasis. And when the king would reach this place, what happened to Agrippas? His eyes started tearing up, and the Chacham said, don't worry, Achenu Ata. Tana Rabbana, Tana, Mishmei Rav Nasan, a Braisa from the name of Rav Nasan, Braisa Shad is Chayvu Saini Yisrael Kliya. At the moment that Agrippas was so moved, Klal Yisrael, of course, Saini Yisrael is a euphemism, were chayiv destruction. Why? Shechnifu loy Agrippas. You know what they did? They flattered Agrippas. Amar Rav Shimon ben Chalafta, miyam shegaver agroi beishel Chanufa, from the day that the power of Chanufa, of flattery prevailed, for this moment when they flattered Agrippas, nisavsu hadinim. You know what happens? The judgment, the Sanhedrin, the Beit Dinim were not able to judge properly. Miniskalkulu ha'maisim, and the actions were corrupted. And people were not able to say to your friends, my actions are greater than your actions. Because why? Because they, as well, they were not moicha to that which happened, and therefore they're all considered included in this Aveira. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Rav Yehuda bar Ma'arava says in the name of Shimon ben Pazi that you're allowed to flatter the wicked. Shenemar, Shenemar, lo yikroi lenavel, as the pasuk says, a person that's disgusting should not be called out to be nadiv, generous. Uleki leilo yomer shaveh, and to someone who is full of desires, don't say that he's noble. So this pasuk says that you're not allowed to flatter anyone. So what's the obvious implication? The Torah is teaching us. Then you're not allowed to flatter. Okay, but that seemingly implies, and nowadays it is mutter. Another source is 3 lines from the white lines. As the pasuk says, like seeing the face of Hashem, and you are appeased by me. So Yaakov flattered Esav in order to protect himself. This is a debated point. Rav Levi, Mashal Shel Yaakov, the Esav, this parable, this mashal of Yaakov and Esav, what's it comparable to? To one who invites his friend for a party. And he realizes the name in the first one line, and he realizes his friend wants to kill him. So the guest says to the host, he's nervous. So he says, the dish I'm tasting, it's like the food that I ate in the king's palace. Amar, the host says, Yadale Malka mitaisvei. The king knows this guy. He was afraid and he didn't kill him. So what do we see? We see that he was allowed to be over in Hanifa to save his life. Amar Rav Elazar, and with this we conclude today's share. Kol Adam sheish b'chanufa, maybe af le'ilam. You bring anger to the world. Shem v'chanfei leiv, yisimu af lo'id. And not only that, his tefillos are not answered. Shem lo yeshua, lo yishavu, ki asaram. They should not cry out when he afflicts them. So we see the terrible evils of flattery, of chanufa. Perhaps to save one's life is a different story, but in general, chanifa is a horrible thing. We'll pick it up from the 2 dots next year. B'siyata dishmaya.